in our group outside, we were discussing what are the most difficult stuff like for you guys when debating. We didn't hear that from the rest of the people, people who were in the group inside. So can we hear briefly what are the most difficult positions that you have, or like while debating, or what problems you have with VP or whatever? Right. So from the other group, we had Prime Minister speech as well. We had whip speeches. They're problematic, and basically that was it. Now we have the argument thingy, so let's start with that. So in terms of the argumentation, right, you can always, when you get a motion, think about different aspects of the arguments, right? You can always think about the social aspect, political aspect, economical aspect, religious aspect, or moral aspect. Okay? So there are usually arguments in one of those. Also, when you have like concrete lack of knowledge, that's always problematic. You can always make intuitive arguments. I mean, in terms of looking at the stakeholders or the people or the groups of people that are going to suffer the most from the motion, right? Because every motion is a change. It's a policy, it's a proposal, it's a change in the status quo. So you think when I say suffer, I don't mean necessarily negative consequences. I mean people who are going to feel the change the most, right? And you can always think about them and make an argument about those. However, when you have a complete lack of knowledge about something, my only suggestion would be to read and learn. I've lost personally several debates, many debates in my life, until I figured out that I don't know something, right? And then you learn that thing, and then like in the next debate, it's a little bit different. I mean, debate will force you, especially if you go internationally, if you compete in international tournaments, it forces you to read and to learn about the world that you're living in. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, of course you should read, and I mean, the more you read, the better you're off. Like, you know, you have more knowledge, but that goes generally in life. Same goes for debate. If you have read different, I don't know, philosophers, or different writers, or different approaches on different questions in society, people who are discussing political theory or social theory or whatever, all of that comes up in some conglomerate of what you are and like of your knowledge, and then of course that you're going to be better off when you get a topic from whichever sphere. That makes sense, right? Right. I hope that answers the question about how to make an argument about something that you don't know. But try to look at the intuitive arguments, right? Try to figure out like how to frame that with the basic things that you already know. So for instance, economics, like when you think about the markets, you always think about, for instance, supply and demand mechanism. You always think about like whether or not control of the market or free market. I mean, hypothetically free market. What is better for the state / citizens / whole society? You always think about availability of the product. Things like they're common sense that do not require necessarily vast amount of knowledge that you need to have to construct an argument. Also, be aware that maybe your judge, right? I mean, your judge, your chair in a room in any international tournament is probably going to be experienced debater. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that, for instance, if you get the economical debate, that the guy is economist or of course, or that your chair is an economist, or that they're expert in that specific field. So, if you want to construct a good and persuasive argument, it needs to be packed in a way that you can explain it in 7 minutes. Even if you, name references and tell everybody that, show everybody that you have quite a lot of knowledge about something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win that debate. Why? Because lots of that knowledge is not common to all the people in the room, and maybe not even to your chair. So you have to explain it. And if you have quite a lot of knowledge that you want to share, then 7 minutes is not near it. Okay? Cool. Right, let's start with the debate. So, Prime Minister's speech. First, when you're opening government, what do you need? What is your basic goal? So you go to president, and what do you think?
What's my problem with that motion?
What is the problem behind the motion?
What I usually do is I try to figure out the context of the debate and the status quo. What's the situation right now? And
Well,
how things
exactly.
are.
I mean, if you know what if you're seeking for a problem, you have to know what is the status quo, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
If there is something complicated, it's about the definition. How do you define this?
Well, not that many things require definition. Some of the motions require a model. So for instance, when we were legalizing drugs, one of the debates that we had, you need a model how you do it. You don't have to be too detailed about the model. If your model cannot be explained in less than a minute, you probably have a problem. I mean, it can take a minute and a half, but it doesn't, the model should not be 3 minutes of your speech. That means it's too complicated. And if it's too complicated, that means that it can crack. So people will talk about the model, and then the whole debate is going to be basically a debate about practicalities, which is something that we always want to debate. Is that okay?
Do you have either a model or a definition?
No, it doesn't work that way. So sometimes you need to define some of the things, right? So for instance, in this house legalized drugs, right? All drugs, for instance, right? We have a pretty intuitive knowledge of what all drugs are. But like when it would be, for instance, this house would I don't know, legalize soft drugs, right? You have to define what are the soft drugs. However, you also need a model. Simple as that, right? Shouldn't be too complicated. Not all the motions require a model, right? So for instance, the debate that we had, taxing church, right? That doesn't need a model. It's a sort of intuitive thing how it's going to work. Or if you're passing a law, you don't have to say, oh, we're going to, submit it to the parliament, then the parliament is going to vote, and like, we know how it works. It's fine, right? Or if you want to, have a military intervention in some of the countries, you don't have to tell me we're going to deploy 50 tanks. We're going to go with 200 airplanes, or whatever, right? You don't have to tell me that. You have to tell me who is going to do it, and then why it would be a good idea. But you have to tell me who is going to do it in terms of we believe that this should be done by NATO, or this should be done by coalition in the West, or this should be done in cooperation with China, Japan. I don't care, right? U.S. and Russia are going to do something together, for instance, right? Or the Balkans should go and save Greece. I don't know, whatever. But you get the point. So that's the first thing. When you get up as a prime minister, first thing you have to do is tell us what that debate is all about. Tell us what is the status quo. Tell us what is the problem. Tell us immediately what's your solution for that problem. And then explain to us through your arguments why is it working. Very, very good thing. Because you want to stay topical and you want your material to be relevant until the end of the debate. Very good thing in the prep time, if you're opening government, is to think about what the debate is about, or to find out what's the problem, and then to think where that debate should end. So when you figure out what is the problem, then you think about what are the clashes that whips are going to take out as the most relevant. What would you like them to be? Right? You probably want that debate to be about X, Y, Z. That would make sense to you, right? Then from back there, then you're constructing your arguments. Most relevant ones. In order to stay topical throughout the whole debate, right? You're doing it backwards. You figure out where that debate as a good debate should end, and then from there, you're selecting strategically your argumentation. Does that make sense? So for instance, the debate about legalizing drugs, for instance, right, will definitely be about the role of the state or control of the market. It will definitely be about it will most definitely be about the ethics and the health and the whole society, how does it work, where it's going to be better or worse and everything else. And you know definitely that it's going to be about the flow of the money. Those are the three very obvious things that are going to happen in that debate, right? And when you know that, then it's easier for you to construct your case as the opening argument. What is the most relevant thing while we propose the most? Right? Same goes for each and every other motion. Right? So for instance, when you have even the very problematic motions, this house would not teach kids that a Santa Claus exists. What is that debate about?
About belief and faith.
Lies.
Example.
Lies.
The role of elementary education.
Forcing something on them,
What did you do?
forcing on them information that they will have to believe that God exists if they want to finish.
No, Santa Claus.
Santa Claus. Well, Santa Claus.
Lying to our children.
If you want to achieve something, you have to work.
Okay. Okay, maybe. What does Santa Claus do?
He gives gifts to good kids.
Can you repeat that?
He gives gifts to good children.
To
The
the
naughty
good kids.
The naughty children, he gives that.
Basically, Santa Claus is just a mechanism of material rewarding. You're behaving good throughout the year, you get the present. The debate about this house would not teach kids that Santa Claus exists is about not teaching kids in material reward system.
Not the actions.
Now when you know that, when you see where the problem is, right? Let's figure out what would the clashes be at the end. You talk to yourself, nobody can hear you.
Talking with the opposition will target if it's an useful way to make it, an easy way to make them realize that being good is actually how they are supposed to be.
Yes, but now we're on the drop side and we want to say that no, because being good has its inherent value and should not be materialized in any way. So, where do we know that the clashes are going to be? What are our clashes going to be? Definitely how do we shape our society? What kind of society we want to live in, right? Because of the future kids, yada yada. Secondly, role of our parents, role of parents in society, how they raise their kids. And third, definitely about the material rewarding itself, whether or not it should exist, should not exist, or not it's useful, yada yada, right? You know that those three spheres are going to appear somewhere in that equation. Then you're constructing your argumentation, your case for proposing the motion based on that. Okay? That's the way to stay topical. That's the way that is easier for you to construct your case as an open government. And also, that creates, that changes the mindset that you have as an open government. So you're not only thinking about how to set up a debate and not to lose, right? But also how to set up a debate about the most relevant things that the motion covers. That's the prime minister's speech. What about the leader of the opposition?
He needs to attack the arguments and the mechanism of the government to try to prove them inefficient or unmanageable.
Do you have to attack everything the government brings?
If you can.
Maybe no problem. You find a problem which is more relevant to the topic, or you find something which is a lot more important. And you matters the most, but by the criterion that they have. I mean, if they want to talk about moral, you prove that something.
Well, you know, if you have an economical debate on whether or not we should tax whatever, something, right? And then somebody gets up and they're like, but there are children in Africa that are starving, it's way better to give them money. But for instance, you would financially help Nepal now, right, because of the earthquake, and somebody gets up and says, but why don't we help kids in Africa? It's not comparable. And we all agree that kids in Africa are important. That's not the comparison that you're making, right? If you're trying to make that, so strategically, yes, you can attack the problem. You can say that's not a problem in our society and then explain why it's not a problem. But in the vast majority of the debates, that's not going to happen, right? In the vast majority of the debates, the opposition is going to agree with the problem. Probably strategically, they're not going to agree with some of the things. Firstly, they're not going to probably agree with the way we are like solution. In terms of, they're not going to agree either with the model, or they're not going to agree with the proposal itself. And then you have to show why the proposal is bad. Since the government is always going to try to show the benefits of the proposal, you have to take those benefits and turn and bring them down. What is the first thing that you're attacking? Hopefully you will never go with the definition, because hopefully you will have a sensible argument. If you agree with the problem, right, the definition is then, you know, yes, the solution. But like first thing, if you're a leader of the opposition, you're first attacking the practical part, and that is the model. You have problems with the model. If you don't have problems with the model, and you're skipping that part, attacking argumentation. Which part of the argumentation you're attacking first?
The description of the status quo.
Sorry?
The description of the status quo. Or the value judgment about the status quo.
Yes, that can be a thing. Sorry?
Most powerful argument.
Yes, their most powerful arguments. You firstly have to engage with their strongest part of their case. That can be done in through several ways, right? So you always have a rebuttal as a tool, right? And it can be a very extensive rebuttal, or as we call it, constructive rebuttal. So rebuttal in which you explain how, I don't know, either status quo is different, or when you add the consequences of the model or proposal that they left out, right? So that's adding to your case as well. Or it can be done, of course, by your argumentation, because your argumentation as an opposition can have a direct clash with the argumentation of the government.
Can you propose just an alternative solution to the problem?
Counter-propping is not popular. It has been done a lot back in the days, like 2005, 6, 7. In BP, however, counter-propping brings you a very, of course you can, but it brings you in a very strategically hard position. So what do you need to do? You then have the burden for your proposal to be mutually exclusive with the proposal of the government. If it's just an extension of it, then you're agreeing in essence with what they proposed, right? So you're not clashing them. You're just saying, oh, that's a very good idea, but we want an add-on, right? We want to add something. I mean, that's not going to win. Second thing is, if it's mutually exclusive, then you're putting the burden on yourself to defend your model and your plan, while attacking theirs. It can be done, but I wouldn't advise you to do that.
But isn't that true for them as well?
But that's their role in a debate. Your role is to show how their, proposal is bad, or how status quo is just a little bit better. So the world is just a little bit better if we're not going with that proposal. Their job, on the other hand, is to show that the world is going to be just a little bit better place if we vote for this proposal. Simple as that. Right. Now, as a deputy prime minister, what do you do? What do?
Extend the speech of the Prime Minister and have new arguments.
You have to have new arguments, yes. What else?
Attack the arguments of the leader of the opposition.
Okay.
And review the arguments of your person.
Only if they're torn down by the leader of the opposition. But basically, if you're attacking things that are brought by the leader of the opposition, then in essence, you're already doing that by rebutting the leader of the opposition. In most of the cases. If you're explaining why their rebuttal is not true, then you're already defending your arguments.
I have a question. How framed should be the extension? I mean, do we have to mention that this exact thing is our extension? Or we may leave the audience or the judge to decide whether this
Wait a second, but we're now at the Deputy Prime Minister. The extension happens after the Deputy Leader of the office.
So we said
We'll come to that.
he needs to add new arguments or not?
Yes.
Isn't that an extension?
You were thinking his extension, like his new material. No, just label it as any other argument. You're not going to say as Deputy Prime Minister.
So the Prime Minister
now.
should hold off on describing all solutions.
Sorry?
Oh no. He should describe the solutions and then let his deputy support it with arguments.
We are not talking about Deputy Prime Minister. Not the Prime Minister, but the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, but they're a team. So when they coordinate strategy, they should say, okay, I'll hold on this part and then you can mention it in your speech.
He means whether the Prime Minister should shoot all his arguments in his speech or should he listen in behind from his deputy?
In a 7-minute speech, if you cover problem and description of the status quo, if you cover solution for the problem that you mentioned, if you cover your strongest argument, right, and the second one, and the third one, and take everything from the Deputy Prime Minister, that probably means that your analysis is very bad. Because if you spend a minute explaining the problem or explaining the problem and the solution, you spend 3 minutes on both of the strongest arguments that you have, right? And if you accept the POI somewhere in between, that's 7 minutes. If you're explaining in 7 minutes 4 arguments, then probably your arguments are not well developed. So Deputy Prime Minister can give quite extensive analysis on any of the points that he considers relevant in the debate. Make sense?
Okay.
Right. So Deputy Prime Minister needs to crash down the leader of the op, engage with them, and bring new materials. Deputy Leader of the opposition does exactly the same from the opposite side. Is that okay? Right.
About the Prime Minister.
Sorry?
So Deputy Leader of the Opposition brings down the arguments of the Prime Minister.
And Deputy.
And the new ones.
All right. Are we done with the first half of the day? Do we have any questions about that? Are we certain? Okay. Extension speeches. Yay! What do you do when you get up as a member of the government? Speak.
You agree with the arguments with the first government and add new arguments and you would tell they are better than the arguments of the first government.
You do none of that, except bring new arguments. Right. So yes, you're not about to contradict the opening gov, right? Which means that if the opening gov was really, really bad in your debate, really bad, right? You just ditch yourself from that. So if you had a horrible model, you just say, we are not here to discuss practicalities. We're going to talk about the principal issues in this debate. If they had really bad argumentation, you just, don't talk about it. If they define something really, really, really horrible that completely destroys your position in the debate, then you say, there's nothing for us to do here except to redefine the whole debate, and then, you rock it with the opposition as much as you can, but ideally you just dish yourself from that, right?
Is it considered backstabbing if the opening government has a bad model and you have a better one to give your model?
If anyone in a debate talks about model or presents a model aside from the Prime Minister, I will personally come and, I don't know, throw you out of the room, turn into a
Yes, so
seriously. So the only people who are talking about the model ever in their lives, right, is actually the Prime Minister and can be the leader of the opposition if he is attacking the model. Or, I don't know, anyone from the if they remember a big bug in a model later on, right? When you're not talking about the model ever, anyone in a debate, only guy who talks about it, or the girl, yeah, is the Prime Minister. You're not allowed to change the model of the second half of the debate, ever. In any debate, in life in general. Right, so, member of the government, you get up and what do?
Well, you try to summarize slightly the debate till your point, and then you start.
So you would emphasize on the things that were said by previous teams to make them more important in the debate.
I think that the member of the government gave a new aspect of the problem.
That's good.
This can change the whole debate. If I will give an example, if we talk about economic aspect of one problem, member of the government can give a morality
For instance, yes, for instance. So different aspect of the debate.
Yes.
Do you clash with the constructive of the deputy leader of the opposition?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In the first government, it's mentioned kind of an argument or mechanism or something, but they just marked it. And you, as a second government, continue and develop it. This idea that you developed in your speech, do you benefit from it or the first government benefits?
That's strategical reckoning by your team. So basically, if you think that they just mentioned it and left it there, and that it's crucial for the debate, you definitely go and develop it and do very good analysis and show why is it important, right? But if they did enough for that to sound relevant, right? And then you just basically talk about irrelevant stuff under the relevant scope, right? So they already covered the most important bit, which is important for this debate. And now you're talking more about it, but like not really about, you know, the core issue thing, which is for this debate very important, then you don't really have an extension, right?
So, you, as an extension speech member of the government, you need to basically redefine the problem, or just look at the problem from a different aspect.
What is the extension?
Your argument.
New argument.
But you already had, okay.
Basically. But how is that argument any different? Why do we call it extension? Why don't we call it just an argumentation?
Because it provides a new perspective on the debate.
Sorry?
Because it provides a new perspective on the debate.
It can be a new perspective on the debate. What else can be?
Because the core ground that you are extending is on the previous mentioned arguments, and you're just increasing the aspects. You're improving the previously set arguments by adding new aspects.
No, I cannot agree with that. Really.
Can you reframe the debate source?
I have a particular question. For example, last week we debated about drones, this house of the banned drones, for example.
Okay.
The first house defined it and argued about military use of drones.
Okay.
But again, the second house argued about civic use of drones.
Oh, that's very, I mean, those are two different debates basically, right?
All right.
So this is why it's problematic. If you get up as a closing up and say we're not going to discuss about military drones and we don't care about the half-an-hour debate that happened before us, we're going to talk only about drones in civil purposes, right? Then you're firstly neglecting half an hour of debate or 4 speeches of a debate that happened before you. And secondly, you're not topical for that debate, right? Because your material is about something else. So then you're creating 2 debates in a row, right? One debate about the top half, which is about military drones, and the other one on the back half, which is about civil use of drones. And those 2 debates can be judged separately if you don't connect them. Do you get what I mean?
Yes.
So it's not necessarily the smartest thing on earth. However, for instance, this house will allow soldiers to sue their countries for negligence. So, for instance, you were a soldier, you were somewhere fighting, and you think that your government has neglected you. Look at like veterans from Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, whatever, right? So the top half was talking about, oh, maybe they were hungry, maybe they didn't have ammunition, maybe they had fewer tanks, maybe they didn't have enough medical something like medicines, whatever, right? Back half can focus only on people who were wounded and then medically treated badly, or people with Vietnam syndrome, for instance, and yada yada yada. Because people who were wounded and were operated badly because of that, because of the lack of medical personnel there, and because of lack of medical conditions and yada yada yada, have something which they're going to live with for the rest of their lives. Because of that. Also, people who were psychologically neglected, I mean, they didn't get any catering from the government after the post-traumatic syndromes, which is popularly called Vietnam syndrome, right? You can only focus on those people and talk about it. So that's just to say you can only focus on some of the groups that are suffering from emotional loss. You can also talk about, specific mechanisms that are given emotion. So, for instance, the motion is this house believes that the schooling system should actively undermine traditional gender roles. Okay? Makes sense? So, schools should undermine traditional gender roles. Top half, yada yada, blah blah, we should, we're going to do it through literature. No, you shouldn't, it's going to be clash in the family, authority of teacher, authority of parents, all the stuff, right? Backhand. Nobody proved in debate so far why schools. Nobody, right? Backhand can talk to me, for instance, about first minute, you can tell me how kids learn. That's the aspect that, should be covered in that debate. How kids learn from watching Disney cartoons, from their parents, in patriarchal society in which we live in, yada, 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 copy-paste mechanism basically all the way. Then, you can tell me how the schools, especially elementary schools, are the only institutions through which all of the kids have to pass, which means the whole society is going to learn from those. And then thirdly, you can give me the relevant justification why the schools do that, because they're the only actor in this society who can. Right? Like you have to feel or to see in a debate what has left or what is the most important, the crux of the debate that has not been covered. Right? So when you're on the backhand, strategically you're going to position yourself, or you're going to choose your extension based on the debate that happens in that room. There is no generic one answer, what is the best extension ever, right? Same goes for the prop and for the op, or government or the opposition, right? Same thing, because the debate is not only dependable on the motion, it's also dependable on the debate that happened in that particular room. So you have to listen to the debate that happened. You have to see what is that is either A, not explained well, so it's missing, or B, what is the most relevant aspect of that debate, and that's where you build your extension. Is that okay? I mean, you have tried several times, right? In theory, everything sounds good. Yeah. You have to practically try a couple of times in order for that to be to click.
As a member of government, if first gov has had an argument that they did not develop to the fullest, and you think you can use it yourself if you develop it further, should you do that?
That's what he asked, and I think I already answered that. But like, the question, the answer would be as follows: if they covered the most basic mechanisms within that argument, right, and that argument is already relevant for the debate, then you shouldn't waste your time. But if they haven't, and they haven't analyzed, like, why is that argument important, how does it influence, I don't know, whomever or whatever in that debate, then definitely is. But you have to listen to that and, do the reckoning by yourself. Evaluate, that's important. Same goes for the opposition. You have to engage with the arguments in the extension of the closing gov, maybe rebut something that's left from the opening gov, and then go out with your extension. Same as the, where are you going?
To the global structure that we met.
Okay. So basically, you should do the same thing. The government, on one side, has, the member of the government, has only to rebut that clear the opposition. Right? But same as that, member of the op rebuts member of the government. Same thing, right? And then brings out the new extension. The only difference between the closing gov and the closing gov is in the whip speech, basically. So same for the gov, you just replicate for the op, and that's the extension speech. Pretty simple. However, for the whip speeches, on the government side, it's still not unfair if you bring up, if you finish the part of the argumentation of your partner. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't bring new arguments. You just can bring new examples, or wrap it all up and show us through the clashes why your extension was the most important thing on planet Earth ever. However, we're going to come to that. How do you do that? However, you're really not allowed to bring new stuff in the op swip. In the gov swip, that's sometimes tolerated only because there's still someone in the debate who can answer to that. If you bring new arguments or parts of the arguments from the op side as an op swip, there's no one to answer that, right? And that doesn't need to say that if you bring new arguments as an op swip, you're going to be penalized. No, but nobody's going to take them into consideration because those arguments were not part of the debate. So basically, you're wasting your time, right? Instead, rather talk about the important clashes and your extension in comparison to the other material in the debate, rather than bringing new stuff that you think is very smart, because nobody's going to take that into consideration, or in other words, you're not going to get any credit for that. Clashes. How do you pick clashes in the debate?
So just a question, when you summarize the debate, you have to do it in such a way to make the impression that your side won.
Well, it would be pretty silly if you would be still in the debate and be like, yeah, we lost this one.
Well, no, but you can be very neutral about it. You can just give an account of what happened so far, and that's it.
Well, if you want to do that, be a judge.
Yeah.
Right? You still want to win. You're still competing. You're a team, right? So yeah, what do you do? How do you pick clashes?
You pick up the arguments that were addressed at least once or twice.
But can you say, well, we brought this in our extension and nobody replied? So your partner brings out the extension. Okay, this is a hypothetical situation. Your partner brings out the extension, the member of the opposition or whatever, right, with government, but do not touch that. Do not have any rebuttal on your extension. Nothing. Right? And you get out as a whip, and what do you do?
If it's a good extension, try not to use it.
Isn't it better not to mention that they have information?
As a whip, you try to flatter as much as possible your colleague, I can say, because after all, as the second government, second opposition, the whole idea is that throughout the idea of the first speaker to tell the other teams and the judge that your idea was the best one in this situation, and saying that even though the first government, first opposition, considering that it's a first government, first opposition, is good, your team's argument, and in this case, your colleague's argument, is the best one in this situation, is most relevant to the topic.
So you have as a whip a duty to your partner to emphasize on your extension, to say that your extension, and to compare it, they put it in clash or two clashes even, and to say that your material as a team was the most important material in the room. Right? So that's the first thing that you have to do. Secondly, you can always have a clash which happened on the top half, but don't, if you have 3 clashes, don't give them more than 1 clash. Because then you're emphasizing the importance of the top half, and you don't want to do that because you want to win the debate. Is that okay? You can always have new examples. You can always have, wrap them up and have like the same or the conclusion which comes from something which has never been said before. The conclusion, not the argument. Is that okay? You are not allowed to bring in new argumentation which could not be foreseen from your partner's extension. So if my partner was talking about babies, I cannot all of a sudden talk about the stores of baby equipment, right? And talk about how they're going to, how with this policy, whatever that may be, those people are going to be better off and our economy is going to be better off. Because that's a completely different aspect, that's a completely different argument from what my partner was talking about. Is that okay? However, I can always say, yes, and thus, since it's going to benefit babies, it's going to definitely benefit their families, and therefore, it's a very good policy because everybody's going to be happier. It's logical, it's just a continuation of something that has already been made. I'm just pointing it out, right? Although it's logical and can be foreseen. I'm not making a new argument. Does it make any sense? Okay. Do you have a rebuttal as a whip speaker? Hell yes. Otherwise, ops extension is going to stand there, right? You have to rebut the extension speaker before you, or if you're ops whip, then you definitely, you can do it through your clashes, of course, but you can definitely rebut the guard whip. So we have a rebuttal, clashes, if you're a whip. If you're extension speaker, rebuttal, extension material, or arguments, right?
Yep.
If you're a deputy prime minister or a deputy leader of the opposition, rebuttal, arguments.